Business is simple. It's just not easy. We focus on three things to help you run and grow your business more easily: talent, sales, and how to scale. This is the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. Hey everyone, Bryan Whittington with this episode of the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. We have Jon Selig from the comedy writing for sales team, the guy who helps sales reps get funnier. Now, my goodness, if you ask my family and everybody who knows me, I need all the help in the universe. But I love Jon's tagline. It says, half sales guy, half stand-up comic, and all parental disappointment. So that sounds like a lot of fun. So Jon, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so the way Jon and I came together is I got skewered a couple of weeks back in trying to put myself out there, shortchanging the script writing for a particular piece of content that we had out there. And Jon, Five by Friday is what the group's called. And Jon was one of the hosts there and gives some really good insights. We also did a couple of episodes back. We talked about improv for sales and leadership. And Jon said, if you think that's good, you got to talk about comedy for sales. So that's why Jon's on the line here. So Jon, with that said, I mean, that's a lot of pressure. Why in the world should we listen to you?
I never said anyone should ever listen to me. It's going to be everyone's choice if they continue to listen after I finish this sentence. But in short, really what I do is I show sales teams how the joke writing process can help them better understand who their buyers are, why they matter to them, and digging deep into the subject matter expertise and the problems that vendors solve for their buyers, and then introduce a creative process to help transform all of that knowledge and insight and understanding and observation into classic jokes that illuminate buyers' pains, the impacts of not solving those pains, what makes them different, and just so that they're more memorable, relevant, and relatable. And just, one other thing I want to add is, yes, you said you were skewered on that. I actually want to commend you for your bravery, because when I was asked to do that panel, they said, hey, do you want to pitch or do you want to be on panel? I said, God, I'm ADHD. My brain moves all over the place. I suck at pitching. I want to go criticize people constructively, of course, versus be skewered to death. So you are the brave one. You are courageous. I am a bit of a coward. And with that said, I just want to thank you again for having me.
That's the way that you warm somebody up. So well done, Jon. Thank you so very much. So my gosh, that was a lot there. So let's unpack that a little bit. So you talked about who their buyers are today, how they buy, their pains, how to differentiate, how to really uncover the personas, how to adapt that and stories to that. So there's an awful lot there. So it seems like you said you have a bit of a process to do that.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If I was to deliver stand-up comedy, which I've been doing for over 9 years, and I was going to go tell a joke about, I don't know, some niche app that people between the ages of 22 and 30 use. Let's say it's a dating app or Snapchat, and the room is full of senior citizens. They're not going to get the joke. Right. However, if the room is full of people of the right demographic and kind of target, they will get it. And so, when I've walked into rooms full of, let's say senior citizens to perform, I instantly scrub all those jokes. Why? Because they're just not going to appreciate those jokes. And the same goes for messaging with our prospects or our buyers. We have to really know our audience, what's important to them, what's going on in their quote unquote lives, their roles, what are they trying to achieve? And we got to go deep on all that stuff and really profile them and understand their psychology and their emotions. What are their concerns? What are their worries? What are their fears? What do they love? What do they detest? What's their desired end state? So just by going through this process of really writing jokes, we're really going to go deep again in our audience and why we matter to them and how we can relate to them.
So talk to me a little bit about that. So how do you go about, because you're doing this in group sessions, correct? Whether virtual or in person, you're doing this for whole sales teams for specific companies, right?
Correct. Yeah. But
okay.
So yeah, I've done some let's call them open registration classes where reps will sign up and participate with other sales reps from other companies too.
Okay, got it. So whether open or closed, how do you start to uncover that? Because knowing our buyers, going deep, going to their getting to their emotional compelling reason why to take action, right? Not sell intellectually, but selling emotionally, because we all know the adage: people buy emotionally, they justify intellectually. So a lot of this is marketing. A lot of this is just your standard prep work for what you should be doing. So how does comedy tie into this, or is your process maybe a little bit different in unpacking that, that will allow sales reps to really want to do this, as opposed to, feeling like they're breaking rocks in prison to try to get at this data?
So the secret is we're really tricking reps into better understanding their buyers and why we manage them by teaching them something fun and a process that's innovative. At least I think so, and I've been told so, and just different from everything else they've done. If they go down the classic sales training or sales methodology, or hey, someone in sales and says, "Hey, here's our playbook. Go read this." They might get bored. They might pick up a couple of nuggets from it, but the idea of comedy writing for sales teams is reps are doing this in breakout groups, and they're swapping insights and understanding of their customers' problems with one another. They're uncovering each other's knowledge, insight, and understanding. And again, the process of writing jokes is the fun part. Once we've mapped out our knowledge on paper and we've come to consensus on what the truth is, we're in a really good position to write a joke that what I call roasts your prospect's pain. So those an old fashioned comedy roast where there's a panel of roasters, and there is a guest of honor who is usually being roasted. They're writing cutting truths about not just the guest of honor but each other, and those cutting uncomfortable truths get people laughing and saying, "Well, that's funny because it's true." So in this case, we're not doing about a person. We're doing about something that totally sucks for our buyer, and it's something that we can help them with. So it's meant to be that connect. The jokes themselves are meant to be connecting tissue between buyer and seller, and to help sellers stand out from everyone else who's trying to get their attention.
Okay, so what would be step number one? So you get these groups together, because I'm starting to have heart palpitations. A bunch of salespeople newer to the organization, or maybe haven't done the research to begin with. We're putting them in peer groups to understand what those emotional compelling reasons are, or what the messaging might be around that. Walk me through that a little bit, and how can we ensure that they're not just making crap up that completely misses the mark?
Well, usually when I work with a team, I encourage the leader to assign reps to groups that offer a bit of diversity. Newer reps with older reps, more senior within the organization, shall we say? Well, I just said that, but even from an age perspective, so people maybe with some more life experience, the introverts with the extroverts, the creative types versus the more buttoned down types, and just get fresh, different perspectives within the group. And if people have, if each group has a couple of people who've been around the block for a while and are successful, they should have a good handle on subject matter expertise. I mean, otherwise that they wouldn't really be able to last too long in their job, shall we say.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes at the same time, the veteran sellers have been staring at something for so long that they don't see the bigger picture, and someone new comes in from the outside and has a whole different perspective on things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of times, even within our own organization, we have a couple of subject matter experts, and the subject matter so well that you're throwing out jargon, you're connecting dots that the average person just never would, because you have so much experience. So that's a really good point that probably most people don't think of.
Yeah, and of course there is that idea of I think you asked the question. I don't really think I answered it very well a couple questions back. So forgive me. Sometimes I do tend to get excited about what I'm talking about and ramble, get lost in my own thoughts like I'm doing right now. However, you were talking about emotions. And people, you're right, but buyers do buy emotionally and kind of justify on an intellectual level. If you're, let's say, responsible, if you're a prospector or you're an AE of some kind, and you're just trying to forge these relationships with your buyers, you kind of need to trigger their emotions. And the idea of roasting a problem that maybe even highlights an impact of not solving the problem within the joke really triggers the buyer emotionally. You want them to go, "That's funny because it's true. I've been struggling with that for the last 2 years. I've been telling the big boss about this, that we need to fix this problem. He or she doesn't see the need to solve it. Perhaps you can help me build that business case by showing subject matter expertise and understanding of the buyer and their emotions and what's freaking them out a little bit through one joke. It allows a seller to cut through the noise and just, like I said, build that connecting tissue between the two, but really harping on their emotions of what affects them negatively or even positively.
Okay, so how do we learn this process? So we go into breakout groups and we're expecting to roast the prospect's pain. So what's maybe how many steps are there? What's step number one kind of thing?
Well, I would need you to sign an NDA with me before we go any further, because this is the kind of stuff I get paid the big bucks for, of course. But
Yeah.
in short, I mean, look, the first thing to do is, if I'm writing jokes about, let's pick on what's a passion of yours.
So a passion of mine is, let's say, outside of business. Let's say flying.
Yeah. So if I was to, let's say, try to appeal to you because I wanted to get on your good side, I would want to know everything, and I wanted to tell you a joke about flying to show that I, hey, I live in your world. I know your world. I know what flying's all about. I would go research everything associated involving with becoming a pilot and understand the steps involved in that, the perils, the fears that go on, the fears and worries that go on in the heads of people learning to be a pilot, the excitement, what gives them the rush. I've never flown a plane, so I can't. I'm not going to pretend to know, but maybe I don't know. When you reach a certain altitude, you feel like you own the world. Maybe that's a feeling you have. I don't know, but I try and understand from people who have flown what their thoughts and their feelings and their experiences are. And then there's a creative process where we have to just break down sentiment, context, and different words and phrases, and try and pick apart, try and sort of expand around each of those. And ultimately, jokes are formulas. They're very formulaic by nature, at least the ones that I teach. Some more avant-garde comedians don't follow those conventions, but if you've ever watched a stand-up comedian from, I don't know, the 60s even through today, you've watched a sitcom from, with the old laugh tracks, whether it's All in the Family, Golden Girls, even Seinfeld to some degree. Seinfeld kind of bucked the trend a little bit, but there's a lot of classic joke structure in the scripts. And jokes, like I said, they're formulas by nature. So I'm sort of getting people to capture their knowledge, go through a creative process, and then kind of sift through the inputs or the outputs, I should say, from the creative process and plug them into joke formulas, and test them and then iterate them.
Yeah. So with the formula, I would think that there's multiple different formulas because whenever you look at comedians, and this is something I've started studying recently, right? Um, they have different there's so many different styles, and that seems to go along with personality. Um, so does it matter the personality, what formula you use, or is it the same formula, but the style dictates, or your style, your personality is going to dictate the timing, how long you wait for the punchline, do you step on their line, how do you deliver it? So can you talk through some of that?
Yeah, the one thing to be clear is, like, there's a big difference between, the one thing I want to clarify is there's a big difference between someone paying 15 or $20 to go watch a professional comedian who's telling jokes, and being a buyer who answers the phone, and let's say someone's delivering a joke through a cold call.
Right.
So no, there's no expectation of entertainment at that moment. There's not even an expectation that it's a sales call. So, I try to teach a process and a way and a method of telling jokes that doesn't allow reps to get too cute with things, because you're just trying to deliver a message that has that resonates with the buyer on, like I said, an emotional level and also a business level. So, I it's a good question you're asking. Delivery needs to be practiced so people are confident in their delivery. If it's, again, over a cold call, if you're delivering the joke, let's say at some point during a discovery and a longer chat, maybe during the demo. But the more we tell jokes, the more natural they roll into our talk track, right? And one other thing I just want to add, I use the word jokes a lot. Um, Jokes to me are not where three members of various faiths walk into an establishment of ill repute and say offensive things to one another. Jokes to me are, one sentence, two sentences, three sentences max, all very short, all with no extra fat in them, going from setup to punchline very quickly, getting from the setting expectations of the listener to the part that subverts their expectations and creates that kind of cognitive dissonance. I don't know if that's the right phrase, and gets them to laugh.
So is another way of saying that you set the you build context, do a pattern interrupt with a joke that would lead to humor to get them emotionally involved.
Yeah, and I always think of like, what I do as being ideal for those doing cold outreach,
Okay.
prospecting. The same joke though can be, delivered by, let's say, a seller or maybe a sales consultant, solution engineer, whatever you want to call them. Buyers don't necessarily remember the jokes, or maybe they, if you send someone a cold email with a joke, did they read it? We don't know. Do they remember it? You don't know. So you can deliver the joke again when you're talking to them. But the jokes are just meant to, the jokes are again a vehicle for really better understanding who your buyer is and why you matter.
Okay, so it seems like a couple of things because there's going to be times whenever you're going to do it on cold outreach, whether it's telephone, email. I'm guessing this would probably work really well in video emails whenever you shoot that, and then also on demos or any of the way throughout. So would it be that you create these different jokes along the way, and it would be planned spontaneity, right? Because you're going to want to practice it and practice it and practice it, but when you deliver it, it seemed like it's off the top of your head. Is my sense? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want it to seem like it's natural. Sorry, I just got distracted. What you definitely want it to seem like it's natural, and the type of jokes that I'm getting sales teams to write are such that even if they fail and someone doesn't laugh, it's still delivering business value. It might just be done in a cuter, clever, more memorable way, and that's a little different, and that hopefully eliminates all the buzzwords that buyers are used to hearing, and just making it more relatable. But that practice is important. People do need to also really love to tell a joke. I don't encourage anyone to tell a joke that maybe they don't feel comfortable delivering, not because it's offensive, but maybe because they don't have the right rhythm for it. Some people do have, more natural timing. Some people through practice can learn delivery. I am not, in case anyone hasn't figured this one out, I'm not a natural comedian at all. I'm a guy who likes to write and kind of assemble my jokes. I'm not the funniest guy in the room at parties. And with my own stand-up act, I really needed to rehearse and I needed to practice. I need to fail. I need to understand, why is this joke, which is so precious to me, not getting across the goal line. And quite often it was either delivery, context, or maybe it was just too long, or maybe it wasn't relatable.
Okay, so context is key. So any suggestion on how to quickly build the context for the joke is, and I'm guessing again, it's other than joining your groups, and we'll give you a shameless plug at the end here.
Woo.
But how do you build up context? Because like I said, context could be on cold outreach or multiple different mediums through any part of the sales process. Um, and my sense is you can use that same joke in every location if the time if it's applicable. So is context just the topic, or context the time of the sales process, or can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's you raise a good point. I like to say that our buyers are micro audiences.
Okay.
Every time you pick up the phone to cold call someone, they're a new audience for your message, whatever that may be. You don't have to make them laugh or try to make them laugh. I just feel it's a great way to break the ice, get them to loosen up. If you laugh, they will give you more time because they'll be like, "That was good. You have my ear. Go." And so context to me is definitely the various channel, like just like you said, there's a difference between delivering a joke over video um, than over email. And of course, you could jazz up your video joke delivery with body language, with tone of voice, facial expressions, versus the same joke just in an email. You open it up and there's a joke, and the joke needs to be funny on paper unto itself. But context is also, when I teach joke writing, um, there's a formula of joke that's not that simple to master. In fact, you need to work at it quite a bit. I teach simple analogies,
Okay.
comparing one thing to another. But then there's the classic setup punchline, where it's all in the misleading of the listener's expectations through context. So I'll give you an example, and let's see if I can remember the joke. Um, but one of the earliest jokes I helped someone write was a founder for a startup. And I said, well, what problem do you solve? He says, we help software developers eliminate the need for a certain kind of database. And I was just like, oh my God, this is the most boring business problem I've ever heard. I don't know how to make this funny. And, I think if I was to go back and look at that problem today, I could do it. But at the time I said, well, I don't know how to make this problem funny. I said, how'd you get into this business? And I'll sort of tell you the joke, as his reply, like as if it were his reply. I said, how'd you get into this business? He said, I spent 12 years developing enterprise software in a bank, but left when the branch manager kicked me out of the lobby.
Oh, jeez.
And so if we look at the context, we're painting a picture in the listener's mind when he says, I spent 12 years developing enterprise software in a bank. What does that mean to you?
That he worked for a bank.
Right. But in what context?
Yeah, so he's going after large enterprise, complex sales, massive solution, solving tons of high value problems.
Right. But I guess I was asking him his background. Like, how did you come
Uh-huh.
up with this idea? And he said, I spent 12 years developing enterprise software in a bank. And in my mind, when he said that, the first thing I imagined was him sitting in a bank branch, literally sitting, in that leather
In the
chair where
lobby,
you're
if you
waiting.
will.
Exactly. And working on a laptop. But I mean, he worked in a large office tower for 12 years, developing enterprise software in a cubicle. And so when I say context, sometimes we're trying to mislead the listener by giving them the idea using words of one context, and then present in a completely different context in the punchline. This is a really roundabout way of answering your question.
Got it. So, but back to that, we're talking about planned spontaneity and the formula of this. And you have the two different models you said, and I'm going to forget them right now. But you had talked about the style of delivery, and what was the other one that you gave? You gave two. It was the delivery style and the.
Well, are you talking about the analogies versus setup punch?
Yes, thank you. Analogies and setup punch, because there was a guy that I used to work with. His name was Sean Coyle, and whenever I interviewed with Sean Coyle and John Rosso, those guys are king of analogies. They can just, you give them something and boom, right off the top of the head. That is a natural giftedness. And on the interview process, I failed miserably because I couldn't do analogies. And they said, tell a joke. Like, I don't do jokes. I'm not good at jokes, right? So they were like, oh my gosh, this guy's horrible, right? And I almost lost the opportunity to work with those guys. Yeah, it was, call it divine intervention or whatever the case may be, but I ended up getting to work with them through just, I think they knew my background and sheer work ethic, but I suck at analogies and the delivery of those jokes, right? So I take others and I can repeat back others. Like that whole,
Ah,
you think you hired Rambo on Friday and Pee Wee Herman shows up on Monday. That's not mine. That's John Ross's and Sean Coyle's, right? So, I can take stuff and redeliver, but developing it, that's where I would be looking for a formula or an approach. And I don't know if other people like that you run into.
well, so a couple of things that you actually just nailed my belief. I don't believe that most people could sit around writing jokes, but I do believe that they can learn to tell some jokes. I
Right.
believe that most people have a sense of humor. Most people know how to laugh at something and they can make it their own. But the process that I teach gets teams writing a whole funnel of jokes, shall we say? And like any typical pipeline or funnel, most of the little leads in the funnel are not going to close, and only a couple will close to help you get to your number. So you have to write a volume of jokes to get just a couple. And the idea is to for every member of the team to say, you know what, those two or three jokes are really funny to my buyers. They make a lot of sense to them, and they demonstrate my relevance and just my understanding of their world and their challenges. And the goal is to get sellers to just be dropping one or two jokes on their buyers repeatedly and over time, to sort of just make for warmer connections, better rapport, and again build that trust by demonstrating credibility through jokes. So that's kind of one point I wanted to make. The other point is that yes, if you're going to sit down and write jokes, you don't just really sit down and write the jokes. You have to just write, period. And you have to sort of sift through everything to look for things like verbs and adjectives and cliches and phrases. And if you want to build those analogies, start finding other concepts, things, people, places that can also to whom those phrases and words also apply.
Yeah. So can you give any suggestion? I know you keep saying, well, and the NDA and whatnot, but any insights that you can do, because we really try to do a how-to. So any, like, what books should we be reading? What should we be doing other than the obvious, signing up with you and your group? What type of things should we be learning?
I mean, I think the most important thing is I would suggest that people learn to journalize and just take.
Journalize. Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah, grab a pad, or if you need to use a Word document of some kind, literally capture your learnings and your understandings and your thoughts and your feelings from every day. It's kind of like writing a diary, but it doesn't have to be as coherent. Just literally free write for a page or two, which means let your mind go and just write a stream of consciousness. Try and keep it focused around everything that went on in your professional life. And then just eventually over time, we start to see little patterns, and maybe our own sense of humor can pick up on some of those patterns based on points we want to make. But we also look, if you're going to write jokes, you sort of need to learn a little bit more about the English language, things like verbs and adjectives, because those words paint pictures as well as certain cliches, right? Cliches we use like, oh, we're really in the dark over here, or I can't even think of another one right now. But but in short, if you're gonna compare, let's say, the problem you solve for your buyers to something else completely way out there, you just have to write everything about that problem and be able to start identifying words that might mean a couple of things, or can be used to describe something else, and just be able to sort of connect the dots between the thing you're trying to describe and something new and different.
Now, how important is customer interviews? Going back to your current customer base, or those that might be ideal candidates, ideal customers, and interviewing them to find out their language. Is that a key component of this to help short track or fast track the ability to do this?
Yeah, I would say if you go speak to happy customers and try and understand their before and after state, you're going to be in a good position to understand what I call the truth.
Right.
Because I mean, think about it. Good jokes, or some people liken them to, at least jokes that I preach, are akin to stories. You're sort of boiling down part of a story, a full story, into a joke. Sorry, a joke can really boil down a story down to one or two sentences.
Right.
And so understanding that, what's the problem? What happens if they don't solve the problem? Why do they choose to solve the problem to begin with? Who's affected by the problem? All this good stuff, and how did you solve it? What were the benefits? Uh, and if there's a way to boil that all down to a joke, but it takes a lot of darts. You got to toss a lot of darts at the board, shall we say?
Yeah, and I would think that you're gonna, just like in sales, you're going to throw a lot up at the wall and have to clean it up, find out what sticks and what matters. And how much is the person on the other line, their personality, influence the way a formulaic joke works.
Well, the beauty of the formulas is if the jokes are written, I mean, let me restart that. Uh, I don't encourage anyone to tell a joke to their buyer that the team doesn't find funny, and of course, doesn't cross all kinds of lines. So just to be clear, never anything offensive, never anything that could offend. We don't tread on things like religion, politics, culture, like nothing, none of this stuff. These jokes are as politically correct as you can get. Um, but the idea is that we have to still find it funny internally and then say, I'm prepared as a group, say, yeah, I would drop this on a buyer. And it's not always going to work, even bulletproof jokes that comedians tell. Like, I have a joke that I look like a couple of particular celebrities, one of whom is fictitious. They're both fictitious, actually. And it's my go-to joke for 9 years. And I don't love telling it anymore, but it works. And when I do stand-up, 1 out of 10 times, I'm expecting to get the big laugh, and there's crickets, and it just happens.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the joke is bad. It means the audience wasn't ready for it. Maybe I tripped up on delivery. And the same with these jokes for our buyers. If they don't laugh, it's fine. It's going to happen. But as long as the joke is rooted in some truth and is trying to illuminate a business challenge, which we're hoping they're struggling with, it should elicit a reaction of some kind versus I'm in a meeting.
Yeah. So, and I mean, let's face it. These people are getting calls, emails, videos all day long, and it's the same stuff, right? I'm going to feature and benefit dump and tell you all the value props and this best practice this and stat here and there, and it glazes over after a while. So I would think, as Josh Braun talks about being the red X in the sea of white circles, using humor, using jokes is a good way to allow you to stand out a bit. Even if it goes flat, people are at least going to chuckle and go, "Man, that was bad," right? Even that would be probably standing out a bit.
Absolutely, and it's the main purpose of all this. In addition to, like I've said maybe 6 times now, just understanding your buyer and why you matter. It's definitely to be more memorable. But like I was delivering my first open registration class, and I had working with just 8 reps, which is the way I like it. It's small. And I asked them, let's hear your opening line when you pick up the phone and you dial out. And 7 out of 8 of them said, "Hey, my name is X with with Y company. Can I have 27 seconds of your time to tell you why I called?" If everyone's using that script, which is apparently some kind of pattern interrupt, and apparently it works for some people. I don't want to fully diminish it. If it works for you, great. But maybe it's more than just the script. Maybe people like the tone of your voice. Maybe people like the gusto with which you deliver it. But if everyone's using that same script, as Josh says, you're a white circle. And if you're calling them up and you're hitting them with something completely different that they've never heard, that makes sense from a business perspective and gets them laughing, you're all of a sudden that red circle. And this is really all I do.
Yeah, got it. Well, so what are maybe some of the biggest mistakes that you see people making whenever they try to bring humor to the conversation?
The biggest thing I see is that people don't know the line. And I'm like I said, I'm very clear about what we'd never want to say to a buyer. And I think, I'm not there on anyone's calls, but I do hear stories sometimes, and they can, some people admit to maybe opening their mouth a little bit too much. And that's where I see things going wrong. But like I said, I'm just super aware of that, and I don't want anyone to misconstrue what it is I offer, what I teach. And there's just a whole set of guidelines about what we cannot talk about when we're telling jokes to our buyer. But even if you call up your buyer and or you're on any kind of call and you tell them any kind of joke that gets them laughing and it's clean, if there's no relevance to them, you're still at ground zero from a credibility perspective, which is why I'm trying to bake in the subject matter that's of relevance to our buyer into the jokes.
Got it. So whenever you had those 8 people on, and I forget how many you said, "Hey, do you have 27 seconds I could share with you the purpose of my call?" What would you have rather had them say?
Anything. Anything. Again, it comes back, if everyone's doing the same thing, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, you're on LinkedIn, everyone's sharing hacks on there. But if everyone adopts the hacks, then you're the hack.
Yeah,
You know, it's like, if everyone's, that's what a hack is. They're just copying someone else in comedy anyway. The trick is to be original, to be your, to, I hate saying be yourself, but be original, be different, be memorable, offer something different than everyone else, so that when someone either answers the call or opens the email or watches the video, that they remember you and that they're glad that they took the time to listen, to read. Those are the two. Listen
got
to,
it.
yeah.
Well, now how did you go about learning this? Because you came out of, you're working with Oracle, for goodness sakes, startups. Um, How did you learn this? I think you said you started, or I was reading your bio, you started in 2011. You weren't natural at this. So, if somebody else is in that same position and they say, hey, I definitely want to bring some humor into this, I believe that this will work. I think this will let me stand out. I think it will allow me to emotionally engage better or connect more quickly with the person on the other line or the other end of the email. What suggestions would you have for them to learn this stuff?
Investment of time. I personally abandoned an entire career to sort of shift gears. I don't necessarily recommend people do that, especially if they enjoy money. But I was, that's an important aspect to life. I mean, there's all this talk about developing side hustles. It's hard to become a master at anything when you're doing something else full time. I had been selling for, at that point, about 9 years. I found it really weird that I was calling up a CIO and telling them which ETL tool to use. I'm like, I don't even know what ETL is. For those of you who don't know, it's extract, transform, and load, which to me sounds something that the head of the Transformers would be saying as they ride into battle against the head of the Decepticons. So, and I don't know if you appreciated that joke, but there you go. See, I'm rolling with the punches here. But in short, I just sort of hit a wall with selling and sales. I learned a lot from it. It was a great challenge, but I always felt that I was meant to do something a little bit more creative. I was never this full blown extrovert that needs attention. I was told about a comedy writing class, and I thought that meant that I was going to meet some people and we were going to write some sketches or produce some YouTube videos. I had no interest in being on camera even. But when I got to the class, the teacher, who was a stand-up comedian, informed us after we'd paid that this was a stand-up comedy class. And then after 10 weeks of classes, we were going to perform as a final assignment 5 minutes of stand-up for our friends and family. And my initial reaction to that was, I'm not doing that.
I'm out.
It was, but the thing was, I got up on stage every week because he'd give us a little bit of homework to do every week, sort of the step-by-step approach to taking subject matter and converting it to humor. Um, and I got up on stage. Everyone's arms were folded. They didn't know me, and I just started to read my thoughts and ideas. And I just be able to read the room to say, are they smiling at this? Does this have? Is there anything here? Are they listening? Even listening is important. If as a comedian you can get the audience to listen to you, that's the first step to getting laughs entirely. And it just takes over time. You learn how to hone and refine the process. And to be clear, there's a learning curve involved. So I wasn't this natural joke writer. We learned the fundamentals of jokes and humor and stand up and all that stuff. Doesn't mean you're a stand up comedian because you take a class. If anything, most of the people in the class really had no hope whatsoever. But I was pretty, what's the word for it? Stubborn and stupid. And I got laughs the first time I did it. And then it was like a drug. You just want to do it again. So I did the final exam, shall we say, because after 7 weeks, I'm like, you know what? I got this. I've delivered much more challenging presentations to executive teams. I can get up there in front of strangers and, tell these jokes. And if they don't like them, oh, well, I'll never do this again. But I did get laughs. And then you're like, it's such a rush. And then you want to do it again. So I found another like little show to do. They let me on. I tweaked my stuff a bit. I added a joke or two. I got even bigger laughs. And then I'm like, oh man, this is all I want to do. But the third time ever on stage was that same show a week later. I hit the holy trifecta of comedy. I blanked. I bombed, and I got heckled by another comedian, and then I bombed some more. So it's really it's more than a trifecta. It's like a quadrifecta.
There you
And
go.
I was so crushed. I felt so bad, but actually that was really where I view like my quote unquote comedy career starting, because I said to myself, I don't want that to be the last time I ever perform. I'm going to figure out how to fix that and never let that happen again. And then it became just this, maniacal quest to get better, even though I had no plans to become a full-time comedian. But you're around comedy a lot. You watch it. You learn a lot from watching truly terrible comedians, not just from a comedy perspective, but from a sales perspective. And you learn a lot by watching the veterans who know what they're doing. And just by immersing yourself in a new environment, you should get better. I'm not going to tell you you will, but you should get a little better.
Yeah, so let's tie this application to sales then. Um, Thick skin. You're going to fail more times than not, and you're going to fail and stand up. You you need to practice your craft all the time, because it's not just that you're good with people. You need to really know how to be with other people that are not like you, and there's systems and formulas to be able to do that. Um, are you also able to tie this to leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I think joke writing and the practical application of humor can be applied to any leader in any role. So if you're the head of HR, you have certain responsibilities where you either need to make maybe some policy announcements to the whole company. When you're making those announcements, the rest of the company is your audience. You want them to like you. You want them to respect you. You want them to have good feelings towards you. You could write a joke about, I don't know, current policy that sucks for everybody and how we're changing it.
Yeah.
If you are the head of, I don't know, customer success, you can be writing jokes to underline certain problems that every customer success rep is dealing with. It applies to every level of the organization. CEOs obviously need to rally troops, need to get moral, lead and get everyone to like them as well. It's all about just understanding an audience and showing that, like, I get what's going on with you.
Yeah. So if I identify a problem, instead of saying a feature or benefit that a product or service has to fix it, it's identifying that problem and really figuring out how to make light of it.
Yeah, and expose it as truth and get them to either go, again, that's funny because it's true, or I never considered that. You're right. That is a problem within our organization. I never even realized it till you told me that joke.
Nice. And that if we steal from Chris Voss and never split the difference, we're ultimately looking for that's right, because that means that we understand them. So if they know that we understand them through a joke, 3 line at max joke, um, that's also allowed us to get engaged with them at an emotional level, so they trust us and they kind of like you, right? So people like to hang out with people that they know, like, and trust. And if we're able to deliver that in 3 lines through a joke, amen, hallelujah, let's do it as often as possible without being a pain in the neck and doing it too often, because then you're not going to be, I would guess, if you're, doing a joke every 3 seconds, they're not going to take you seriously.
Man, I schooled you pretty well on this.
See that?
You did my job for me. Yeah, exactly. I'm a firm believer that that a quick joke can get a buyer to like you because and trust you because you're being credible through the whole through the joke. You're just demonstrating a lot of good stuff in 2 sentences.
Got it. Okay. Well, so what's one hack that you might be able to give us, from a let's do cold outreach, because that's oftentimes the most difficult. What's one hack that you might suggest to our folks that they could take and utilize?
One what? I'm sorry.
Like comedy hack or comedy approach, comedy insight. What's one insight that you can give for them?
I think there is no hack. I again, the term hack to me represents a shortcut, and I don't believe there are shortcuts. I do believe that you put in the work to something and sift through the pieces, you can assemble a good joke. And like I said, I think writing and just doing the research and building out a profile of who your buyer is, sort of Venn diagram of who's our buyer, who are we, and the overlap of the two, the intersection, is the relevancy part. And
Okay.
that's the world where the jokes need to come from. So I can't offer a hack, but you can't be a good consultative seller if you don't understand everything about the buyer, the problems you solve, and what kind of impacts those are going to have on the buyer. Because at the end of the day, salespeople, to me, should be they're really niche consultants. They're not,
Yeah, I'd wholeheartedly agree with that. I always say that you get paid, your pay is directly proportional to the size problem you solve. So if it's $15 an hour problem that you solve, hey, would you like fries with that versus, selling some system that's going to take people to Mars or whatever safely, or, solve how people can drink water cleanly. You're going to get paid directly proportional. So yeah, absolutely. So really your hack is, to use the Queen's English, there ain't one. Put in the work, understand your buyers, and start writing.
yeah, express yourself. Even if it means using a transcription tool, maybe at the end of the day, just on our smartphones, babble into our phone. Maybe it transcribes everything and sends it to an email. Keep it all in one document. There is no hack to writing jokes. That's not a thing that there's a hack for, which is why I'm so damn valuable.
So maybe the other hack to that is, okay, let's pretend that you put that time aside. Um, well, then put the time aside to take it and review it and do something with it. Because if you're sitting there babbling, you're just going to look like a fool walking down the street. So you might as well do something with it. If you're going to look foolish, you might as well be successfully foolish.
Yeah, I mean, the next step to it all is just to be able to isolate. Again, like if you had, let's say, 10 calls with customers that day, sum up the what was discussed in each call. Maybe you look for the common patterns of
Yeah.
relevancy. And I mean, if most of your buyers are dealing with certain problems, which extend to you being able to have a real conversation with them, then those are the areas you might want to be able to write a joke about it, and figure out why those little issues are so important to them.
Yeah, interesting. So really, you're trying to spot patterns, um, to be able to write these jokes around. That's going to allow you to better contextualize, uh, to be able to deliver a more succinct joke or more succinct message. So, oh, that's some good stuff there. Okay, perfect. Any resources that, other than yours, and we'll get to that in a second, other than any resources that you might recommend, books, podcasts, different guides?
Yeah, a podcast that's a good podcast. They call it a podcast about jokes, but it's really more about bits and where comedians come up with their material and how they deliver it. It's called A Good One, and I think it's put out. I think it's put out by Vulture, and it's available, wherever you could find podcasts, shall we say? The reality is, I just encourage people to watch as much comedy and not just stand up, but watch as much all the different forms of comedy. Figure out why are we laughing at things? What are you connecting with? What are people, what are other people connecting with? But also just understand the rhythms of how funny people think and operate and deliver.
Can you hit that a little bit more? So, whenever you're talking about rhythms, I take that a couple of different ways. Can you give an example?
Yeah, I mean, every comedian has their own deliveries. Let's focus on stand up. When I, in my 9 years of doing comedy, every new comedian that comes to the scene and starts doing open mics, most of the time you could say, oh, they're trying to be that comedian. They're trying to be someone else. They're trying to mimic their delivery. And it's natural. We've all done it. We all hear our influences in our heads. And that for sellers, that's a good thing because it allows you to understand timing and delivery and how to take one joke that you write and deliver it to your buyer in a way that they get the joke.
Got it. Okay. Well, so let's pull out the magic eight ball. What's the future hold? I mean, it is loud out there. All different ways that I'm going to try to get a hold of somebody. All different mediums. There's all different mediums have anti you getting a hold of me like, um, programs in there. I mean, iPhone doesn't allow, certain calls to make it through unless if you're in a contact list. There's all kinds of stuff happening. So, what do you see in terms of sales in the future? Any sense? What are you telling your people to really watch out for?
I'm clueless about this stuff. This is my philosophy, and this comes from an early boss I had before I was in sales. Was technology changes, but people stay the same. And my biggest observation since I got into doing comedy writing for sales teams is that there is kind of a younger generation of sales rep who has grown up staring at screens and interacting with screens, mainly text. So text is a more popular way for people to speak than the good old fashioned phone conversation. And I think the art of conversation and relating to humans one on one, using using our mouths, shall we say, is vanishing a little bit. And I think it's about being able to pull ourselves away from screens, build our ability to connect with other humans in a more don't oh I'm gonna hate myself for saying this, more authentic way. I hate that term, but just in a more old fashioned way. Let's say if we look at the history of sales, it used to be a door to door endeavor. People would knock on doors. If the person who answered the door liked the look and the tone of the person who knocked on the door, rang the bell, they were going to give them the time. And then as we moved to phones, as the phone became a vehicle for sales, it all became, do I like the sound of this person's voice or what they're saying? Do they sound friendly? Are they funny? Are they getting my attention? We're in this era where everyone's just trying to bombard everyone else with email about, hey, I see you love fly fishing, or I see you we're on on Bryan's podcast, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I actually got an email not too long ago where someone said, hey Jon, I heard you on this podcast. I really liked what you said about X, Y, and Z. Sorry, that's Canadian for Americans, for Z. Sorry, I just don't want to confuse anybody. We say Z, not Z. But then the person who emailed me went on to pitch. So flattery and pitch. And the pitch had no relevance to me whatsoever. And rather than writing back to this person and saying, hey, thanks, I really am flattered that you like me on the podcast. Thanks, but no thanks. I decided to not respond.
Okay.
Because I mean, what kind of a sales coach would I be if I validated their approach, which doesn't matter.
Got it. So your what the future holds is go back to the old days and learn how to communicate with people, like you said, through your with your mouth.
Yeah, and of course our minds. I mean, look, I call comedy writing for sales teams uh, CrossFit for selling profession, CrossFit for sales skills. I think that's what I call it. I forget already. Um, and
Might want to write
because
that down.
yeah, and short, it's like we're if to write jokes, you need to be able to write full sentences, use punctuation, understand how the English language works. You have to be able to assemble the jokes. You have to practice them, and of course, you have to go back and do the research to understand the truth and what it is we want to write jokes about. And you have to practice. I've said this already, but you got to practice the delivery. And so there's all these good communication skills involved in writing jokes. And I think human communication is really where a lot of modern sales organizations are failing, and ability kind of to think critically as well.
Got it. Okay. Well, hey, I can't thank you enough, Jon, for joining us here today. So let's get down to it. Who should reach out to you? How should they do it? And why should people reach out to you?
Well, sales leaders, anyone who's ever planned sales training, team building, of course, those good old sales kickoffs, QBRs, but any sales leader who's looking to help their reps better understand, like I said, who their buyers are, understand the subject matter expertise about, why they matter to their buyers, and is just looking for a creative process to get some more memorable messaging. Anyone who likes what I just said and comprehends it should get in touch. It's not ready yet, but I will have a self-guided course that'll have at some point kind of drop-in sessions. Let's call them open mics, so that
Okay.
people can get checkpoints and feedback on, hey, am I going there on the right track from a self-guided perspective? Get feedback from their peers and from me. And if they want to go through it on their own, great. But at the same time, my specialty is really working with sales teams at companies.
Do you have any of those, group of 8 session people coming up or?
Not until, well, this is a weird answer to that. I will offer that to members of one company. So if there's 500 sellers and 8 people want to go through what I do, they all have something in common. That's far more easy to deliver than an open registration with people from different companies, which
Yep.
is why I'm moving to this self-guided model with these drop-in sessions. I feel it'll go smoother than if 8 people from different companies are kind of forced to listen to each other over the course of an hour and a half.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
complicated. You put me on the spot for a lot of tough questions today, so
see that son of a gun. Sorry, I don't mean to do that, but yeah.
that's all good.
So I would say this. Let's keep in touch whenever that thing comes out, because we have a lot of individuals that are listening to this that would be helpful. Now, what would you? I guess one last question, and I should have maybe said this earlier. What would you say to the manager, to the leader that says, "Hey, play it straight. Don't bring humor. Just blah. Just do the talking points." What would you say to that person?
I would say, have you ever had a conversation with a fellow human being? I mean, look, I understand that there's definitely, it was interesting. I got on a call with a bunch of sales enablement professionals from one company. They were about a dozen, and they were looking at me and sniffing at me, so to speak. And one person chimes in and says, "We teach our sellers to never use humor because it could offend them." And I'm just like, why do you have to offend them to make them laugh? Like, where does that impression come from? I understand that people think of stand-up comedy, they think of Don Rickles, and they think of being offensive. I mean, the most successful comedians on the planet aren't offensive at all. And humor is just, it's a means of communication and building rapport. So I can't look, I understand the concerns, but I also think that, again, if we go back to the origins of sales, it was a personality game, not a numbers game. It's always been a numbers game, but it was more of a personality and relationship building game. And people want to talk to people who they like.
Yeah.
And it's so corny. I mean, I don't believe that'll ever change. So you can train a team of robots and risk turning off a bunch of prospects who don't know, because there's no rapport being built, and just pray that they're delivering a bang on message. But teaching people to inject a little personality, a little humor into everything, um, I personally believe in it, because everyone I know who's been successful in sales, save for one person, has had a good sense of humor.
Same for one person. I would love to hear who that one was. So, hey, everyone, I really appreciate it. This has been, or on behalf of Jon Selig. I got it right. See
Uh-huh.
that? So Jon had to school me in the very beginning. I was speaking American to his Canadian. So Jon Selig, reach out to him through, they can reach out to you through LinkedIn, or how should they reach you?
LinkedIn on my website, johnselig.com. The H is both silent and invisible, meaning there is no H in John. And that's the best place to get a hold of me, as well as LinkedIn, like you said.
All right. So go out there, write some jokes, figure out your people, get after it, have some fun. Thanks, everyone. This is Bryan Whittington signing off with this episode of the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. See ya.